Chapter 4. Craggy Tops. The train sped on through the countryside, passing many stations and stopping at very few. On towards the coast it went, through high mountains that towered up, over silver rivers, through big straggling towns, and then it came to wilder country. The sea wind came in at the window. "I can smell the sea already," said Jack, who had only once before been to the sea and scarcely remembered it. The train stopped at last at a lonely little station. "Here we are," said Philip. "Tumble out." "Hi, Joe. Here I am. Have you got the old car handy?" Jack and Lucian saw a strange man coming towards them. His skin was lined, his teeth were very white, and his eyes darted from side to side as he looked at them. Running behind him was a girl a little older than Lucian, but tall for her age. She had the same brown wavy hair that Philip had, and the same tuft in front. Another tufty, thought Jack, but a fiercer one. It must be Dinah. It was Dinah. She had come with Joe to meet Philip in the ramshackle old car. She stopped short in the greatest surprise when she saw Lucian and Jack. Jack grinned, but Lucian, suddenly feeling shy of the strapping, confident-looking girl, hid behind her brother. Dinah stared in even greater amazement at Kiki, who was telling Joe to wipe his feet at once. "You mind your manners," said Joe roughly, talking to the bird as if it was a human being. Kiki put up her crest and growled angrily, like a dog. Joe looked startled. "That a bird?" he inquired of Philip. "Yes," said Philip. "Joe, that trunk should go in the car too. It belongs to my two friends." "They come to Craggy Top," said Joe in the greatest surprise. "Miss Polly, she didn't say nothing about friends." "No, she didn't." "Philip, who are they?" asked Dinah, coming up and joining the little group. "Two friends from Mr. Roy's," said Philip. "I'll tell you all about it afterwards." He winked at Dinah to make her understand that he would explain when Joe was not there. "This is Freckles. I told you about him, you know, and Lucian too." The three children solemnly shook hands. Then they all got into the jerky, jumpy old car, with the two trunks at the back, and Joe drove off in a manner that seemed most dangerous to Lucian. She clutched the side of the car, half frightened. They drove through wild hills, rocky and bare. Soon they saw the sea in the distance. High cliffs bounded it, except for breaks here and there. It certainly was a wild and desolate coast. They passed ruined mansions and cottages on their way. "They were burnt in the battle that I told you about," said Philip, "and no one has rebuilt them. Craggy Tops, more or less, escaped." "That's the cliff behind which Craggy Tops is built," said Dinah, pointing. The others saw a high, rocky cliff, and just jutting up they could see a small round tower, which they imagined was part of Craggy Tops. "Craggy Tops is built out of reach of the waves," said Philip, "but on stormy nights the spray dashes against the windows almost as strongly as the waves pound the shore." Lucian and Jack thought it all sounded very thrilling. It would be fun to stay in a house that had spray dashed against its windows. They did hope there would be a terrific storm whilst they were there. "Is Miss Polly expecting you all?" asked Joe suddenly. He was plainly puzzled by the two extra children. "She didn't say nothing to me about them." "Didn't she? How strange," said Philip. Kiki screeched with laughter, and Joe wrinkled up his nose in dislike of the noise. He was not going to fall in love with Kiki, that was certain. Jack didn't like the way the man looked at his pet bird. Dinah suddenly gave a shriek and pushed Philip away from her. "Oh, you've got a mouse down your neck! I saw its nose peeping out. Take it away, Philip. You know I can't bear mice." "Oh, shut up and don't be an idiot," said Philip crossly. Dinah at once flew into one of her tempers. She clutched Philip's collar and shook him, trying to dislodge the mouse and frighten it away. Philip gave Dinah a push, and she banged her head against the side of the car. She at once slapped him hard. Jack and Lucian stared in surprise. "Beast," said Dinah, "I wish you hadn't come back. Take your two horrid friends and go off again to Mr. Roy." "They're not horrid," said Philip in a mild tone. "They're fun." He put his mouth to Dinah's ear after seeing that Joe was paying no attention and whispered, "They've escaped from Mr. Roy. I asked them to. Their uncle will pay Aunt Polly for them to stay with us, and she can pay that bill you told me about. See?" Dinah forgot her temper as quickly as it had come. She stared with interest at the brother and sister, rubbing her bruised head as she did so. What would Aunt Polly say? Where would they sleep? This was going to be exciting. Joe drove headlong over the bumpy stony road. Jack wondered that any car could stand such driving. They drove up the cliff and then down a hidden way that sloped round to Craggy Tops. And there, suddenly, was the roaring sea and Craggy Tops standing suddenly above it. Built halfway down the cliff, the car stopped and the children got out. Jack gazed at the strange house. It was a strange place. Once it had 2 towers, but one had fallen in. The other still stood. The house was built of great grey stones, and was massive and ugly, but somehow rather grand. It faced the sea with a proud and angry look, as if defying the strong gale and the restless ocean. Jack looked down at the water. On it and circling above it were hundreds of wild seabirds of all kinds. It was a perfect paradise of birds. The boy's heart sang for joy. Birds by the 100, birds by the 1,000. He would be able to study them to his heart's content, find their nests, photograph them at his leisure. What a time he would have! A woman came to the door and looked down at the 4 children in surprise. She was thin, and her hair was sandy-coloured and wispy. She looked tired and faded. "Hello, Aunt Polly," cried Philip, running up the stone steps. "I'm back." "So I see," said Aunt, giving him a peck of kiss on his cheek. "But who are these?" "Aunt Polly, they're friends of mine," said Philip earnestly. "They couldn't go home because their uncle broke his leg, so I brought them here. Their uncle will pay for you having them." "Philip, how can you do a thing like this? Springing people on me without telling me," said Aunt Polly sharply. "Where will they sleep? You know we've no room." "They can sleep in the tower room," said Philip. "The tower room! How lovely!" Jack and Lucy-Anne were thrilled. "There are no beds there," said Aunt Polly in a disagreeable tone. "They'll have to go back. They can stay the night and then go back." Lucy-Anne looked ready to cry. There was a harshness in Aunt Polly's tone that she could not bear. She felt unwelcome and miserable. Jack put his arm round her and gave her a squeeze. He was determined that he would not go back. The sight of those gliding, circling, soaring birds had filled his heart with joy. Oh, to lie on the cliff and watch them! He would not go back. They all went in, Joe carrying the trunks. Aunt Polly looked with much disfavour on Kiki. "A parrot too," she said. "Nasty, squawking, screeching bird. I never liked parrots. It's bad enough to have all the creatures you collect, Philip, without a parrot coming too." "Poor Polly, poor old Polly," said Kiki unexpectedly. Aunt Polly looked at the bird, startled. "How does it know my name?" she asked in astonishment. Kiki didn't. It was a name she herself was often called, and she often said, "Poor old Polly," or "Poor old Kiki." She saw that she made an impression on this sharp-voiced woman, and she repeated the word softly, as if she was about to burst into tears. "Poor Polly, dear Polly, poor dear old Polly." "Well, I never," said Aunt Polly, and looked at the parrot more kindly. Aunt Polly felt ill, tired, and harassed, but no one ever said they were sorry or seemed to notice it. Here was a bird pitying her and speaking to her more kindly than anyone had for years. Aunt Polly felt strange about it, but quite pleased. "You can take a mattress up to the tower room and sleep there tonight with the boy. What's his name?" said Aunt Polly to Philip. "The girl can sleep with Dinah. It's a small bed, but I can't help that. If you bring people here without telling me, I can't prepare for them." The children sat down to a good meal. Aunt Polly was a good cook. It was a mixture of tea and supper. And the day before their breakfast, were the sandwiches that Mr. Roy had packed for Philip, and one packet of sandwiches did not go far between 3 hungry children. Dinah gave a sneeze, and the parrot spoke to her sternly. Where's your handkerchief? Aunt Polly looked at the bird in surprised admiration. Well, I'm always saying that to Dinah, she said. That bird seems to be a most sensible creature. Kiki was pleased at Aunt Polly's admiration. Poor Polly, poor dear Polly, she said, her head coyly on one side, her bright eye glinting at Aunt Polly. Aunt Polly likes your parrot better than she likes you, whispered Philip to Jack with a grin. After the meal, Aunt Polly took Philip to his uncle's study. He knocked and went in. His uncle Jocelyn was bent over a sheaf of yellow papers, examining them with a magnifying glass. He grunted at Philip. So, you're back again. Behave yourself and keep out of my way. I shall be very busy these holidays. Jocelyn, Philip has brought 2 children back with him. And a parrot, said Aunt Polly. A parrot? Said Uncle Jocelyn. Why a parrot? Jocelyn, that parrot belongs to one of the children that Philip brought home, said Aunt Polly. Philip wants these children to stay here. Can't have 'em. Don't mind the parrot, said Uncle Jocelyn. Keep the parrot if you want it. Send it away if you don't. I'm busy. He bent over his papers again. Aunt Polly gave a sigh and shut the door. He's so interested in the past that he forgets all about the present, she said, half to herself. Well, I suppose I must ring up Mr. Roy myself, who will be wondering about those children. She went to the telephone. Philip followed close behind her, longing to know what Mr. Roy would say. Dinah peeped out from the sitting room, and Philip nodded towards the telephone. If only Mr. Roy was cross and said he would not have Jack and Lucy Ann back. If only Aunt Polly would think the cheque was big enough to make it worthwhile letting them stay. End of chapter 4.